My name is Nikki James. So when I originally applied to participate in this conference, I was a student at the University of Liverpool Doctor of Education program. But since I did that, I successfully defended my thesis, and I work in an experiential learning research team at Northeastern University, and I'm based here in Massachusetts. So, bit of a global citizen, and an upgrade in my title since then. So I'm really excited to be sharing this work with you today. So my background is very it's traversed a lot of different things, but one thing I am very passionate about and have always been passionate about is helping people help people. And it seems kind of strange, and it might take you a little bit of a while to work out what that means, but essentially, like, ever since I was a really small child, I always wanted to help people. And then as I got older, I was like, well, I want to help other people get involved in helping people. So I started very early in my career working with a community development organization and a not for profit in Australia, helping young people understand social justice issues. So I would take them out on a lot of experiential and immersive experiences to learn firsthand about some of the social justice issues in Sydney and Australia. And so it was always really fulfilling for me to help young people in high school really start to understand some of the challenges we were facing as a country. And then that just carried on through my life. But one of the things that hit me along the way was that I wanted it to be more than charity, more than giving donations to not for profit organizations, although that's really important. What I thought was a more sustainable, I guess, approach and way that I wanted to do things was to actually show people, students that I was working with, how to bring, I guess, um, helping people into everything that they do to actually impact more systemic and scalable change, and not just having their job and doing charity or volunteering on the side, but actually bringing this sense of wanting to do good in the world into everything they did and every facet in their life. So I've done that in many different forms. And so I feel like a lot of this work is very steeped in who I am. So I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. As I mentioned, I was a doctoral student at Northeastern University. Liverpool University in the UK. I did that from Australia. So it was a fully online doctorate. So it truly was a global experience. I learnt with people from all around the world. I'm now a senior researcher at Northeastern University. And for those that don't know Northeastern, it's very well known for experiential learning, which is what I love and am passionate about and have done my whole life. So I love that I get to outwork my passion there. I also am a senior research fellow at a technology company. So 6 years ago, or almost 7 years ago now, I was teaching in a business school in Australia and realized that a lot of the technology I was being told that I needed to utilize in my teaching, I was banging up against the walls of it because it was limiting what I wanted to do and the way I wanted to instruct my students. And so I decided to actually jump ship for a while out of the higher education sector and into a technology company, one, so I could learn how to speak the language of educational technologists, so I could really actually help them build technology that better supported teachers and educators and students, but also so that I could help build a piece of technology that supported experiential learning, because that's what Practera does. I'm also really involved in training faculty in low resource economies, particularly in the MENA region. Before this meeting, I was actually doing an instructional design workshop for faculty in Jordan in the MENA region, which was super exciting. And then I also teach a really cool learning program called Designing Technology-Enabled Experiential Learning with the Institute for Experiential Learning. But all of that is because I'm really, really passionate about helping people help people and doing that in an experiential way. Hence this session being about experiential business projects. So this particular story and this work that I'm going to share today, it actually all started at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. So I was working at the university with students. So I wasn't actually teaching yet. I was doing a little bit of like guest lecturing in the classroom, and I think I was teaching at a different institution. But I was actually involved at the University of New South Wales in the student development department. So that's, I guess here it would be student success or co-curricular programming to help students with internships, co-op experiences, all of those types of things. And I was brought on specifically to start new programs. And because, as I said, I have a passion for helping people help people, all of those programs had some sort of social element to them. So we set up a Habitat for Humanity program where students got to go and travel and help build houses. We set up a program called the Volunteer Army, so that international students that were coming into Australia could go out and volunteer in the local community. That was actually my first dabble in building a technology, because we actually created a technology to make that all happen. So I also had the fortunate opportunity to work with some incredible students, and I wanted to share their story today because it actually helps tell the narrative of why I think this is so important. And so these are 4 of the students that I had the honor of working with really, really closely at the University of New South Wales. So Andrea Pitt was doing a Bachelor of Commerce and Economics. Alice was doing a Bachelor of Engineering, but also was a business student. Hill St. George, he was a Bachelor of Law, but they were all overachievers. So they were in Australia what we call double majors. So they were all doing business or commerce and something else as well. And then James Vitiliotis, he was doing a Bachelor of Commerce and a Bachelor of Engineering. So these students, they were, 20, 21 years old at university studying business. But what was really interesting is they were all really passionate about giving back on the side. So they were all really involved in all these student programs like the Habitat for Humanity program, or other opportunities on campus to support incoming students. But one thing that was really interesting to me was that those 2 worlds of theirs were very, very separated. They weren't, they weren't utilizing, there was never really an opportunity for them to use the skills that they were learning in the classroom in a way that would help people, and in a way that would give back to the community. So there was this disconnect, in a sense, with the skills and the knowledge and the wonderful things they were learning in the classroom and how they outworked their concept of service and service learning. They weren't really brought together really well. But what I also realized is one day, which it's 10 years later now, so I can tell you there and now, one day they were going to be some business leaders in our country, and perhaps even in the world, that would have the potential, if they could see how their passion for helping people could be collaborated with their business skills and their knowledge and the work they did, the day-to-day work they did in business, and in the world that they were excited to move into, that maybe they could actually make even more of an impact in that sphere if they knew actually how to bring these 2 things together. And what I do know as a learning designer, and having studied learning science as my doctorate, is that transfer of skill or transfer of knowledge doesn't necessarily happen by osmosis. We have to actually intentionally help make that happen in a lot of cases. We can't just assume that students will actually get that connection point, or any human for that matter. Sometimes we have to provide opportunities to show how that actually works. And so that's kind of, I guess, my why for this work that I do now. Why help link business outcomes to the Sustainable Development Goals is because I think that if we can provide a really practical way to integrate the Sustainable Development Goals and all the amazing work that is happening towards those goals, and actually link that to business outcomes in the classroom when students and our future business leaders are learning, that they will go out into the world, maybe not today, be a leader of a business that can make decisions that impact a fairly substantial change, but in time they might be able to. So just for example, jumping back here, we see Andrea, who 10 years later is a former VP of training at Goldman Sachs in New York City. So maybe didn't have a lot of influence when she was a student in the classroom, but potentially had the opportunity to make some business decisions as an adult. And if we were able to help her kind of make that connection with how her sense of social justice and giving back to the work she did in the business world, then maybe she would be able to make different decisions in her role once she had influence. And same with Alice. She is now the head of future business strategy for AGL, which is one of Australia's largest energy companies that provides energy all around Australia. So, head of future business strategy, perhaps the decisions that she's a part of can help reach one of the Millennium Development Goals, particularly, or the Sustainable Development Goals, sorry, particularly around renewable energy. So it has the chance to make an impact. Ahillen is a really cool story. When he was at university, he was really, really, really passionate about becoming a litigator and getting into the law room and being a business lawyer and all this sort of stuff. But I actually ran into him maybe 4 years after he finished university, and he just like grabbed me and said, well, I enjoyed that, but I felt, it wasn't fulfilling. Like, he enjoyed being in law and working for businesses and all of that sort of thing. And he actually ended up leaving that profession and moving into what in Australia is called social enterprise. And he's a co-founder of a thing called Vitality Club. It's basically a club that supports seniors to keep engaging in their community and not be isolated once they retire. So senior engagement in education, senior engagement in health, service, volunteerism, but as a way to keep senior people active members of the society. So that's his work now, which is super amazing. And then James Vitaliotis, he is a product leader for Zeller. So it's a technology, a finance technology. And he also was really involved in TravelX as they transitioned and pivoted into the technology paradigm as well. So although when I was working with these amazing young people, they were just starting out in their career, now they're in a place, and they will continue to be in a place where they can have some really significant impact on decisions for some larger businesses in our world, and perhaps even help make changes from the inside. And so that's why I'm super passionate about this work and the work that I do every day. The other two reasons is, for me, for the students, when I try and, as much as I can, try and embed the SDGs and the concepts of shared value and more sustainable practices in business into my teaching of students and their practical experiences. What I think is it makes it more than charity and philanthropy. So it makes it something that they can actually do with their life and be a part of their decision making in their everyday business practices. So it kind of integrates it into their life, as opposed to it being separated from the work and the business that they do. And the second reason is, as I said, it has the potential to transform businesses from the inside out. I can just picture sending out all of the business students from all around the world, if they've all had this understanding of the SDGs and in their education in one way or another, imagine the impact over time as they all go out and slowly start to work in businesses and then take more responsibility and be making decisions. If we have given them that foundation of showing them practically how they can use the SDGs as a way to inform their decision making and hopefully even do work that contributes to the achievement of the SDG goals, we would be creating a world that is, a very different reality than the reality we are living in now. And I think that's really exciting. But I think as well, that's a very ambitious and audacious goal that we have, and it's really hard to do. And I myself have probably failed more than I've succeeded. But I just want to share with you, I guess, the process that I follow. I have the fortune of being an instructional designer, and particularly in an online setting, and I've been teaching online for about 10 years now. So what I wanted to share today in this session was not just what I was doing and the work, but how you can actually utilize, like, I guess in a sense, the process that I followed to create these programs to hopefully give you some ideas of the way that you as an educator or even as a student can embed this into, clubs and societies that you're involved in university, or lots of different types of courses and classes, because I'm sure we have faculty here from all around the world in all different settings and domains. So how I'm actually doing it. So that's what I want to focus on. So I do realize there's probably some students in here and there's probably some instructors as well. So I wanted to think of stuff that would be meaningful for you, because I think sometimes as a student, you might feel, and I certainly did, that if you can't really you may not feel like you have control over what you learn about in the classroom or what you choose to do. But I think that if you're really passionate about the SDGs and sustainable systems and processes and shared value and all these concepts that are so important for the future of our world, you can probably, even if an instructor of yours isn't intentionally bringing this into their classroom, there are ways that you can bring it into your, I guess, your assessments that you're writing and the activities that you're doing in the classroom. And maybe that actually, even though it's just you bringing your opinion and your beliefs and your perspective, it could help encourage or inspire others to do the same. And maybe even your educator or some of your faculty might go, wow, that's a really cool idea. I might start to do that even more. So even though it may just be you that's doing it, you can still have an impact. And so the couple of the ways that I used to really encourage the students that I worked with to do this in other areas is, as you're writing assessments and doing things like that, you can choose to use sustainability based theories and approaches in your assessments and your work. So if you're writing a paper about economics, what are some of the more sustainable economic models that you can recommend? If you're writing about, business strategy, how can you implement sustainable business practices as part of the conversation and part of what you write about? How can you lace it into the work that you're already doing? Because what you're doing, you may also very slowly impact the change of perspective and maybe your professors will start to talk about that as well. And I think that that's a really exciting thing. And then the second thing that I have always encouraged students to do is to choose businesses that have a sustainability focus to intern or co-op with. So, or any of your opportunities where you're going out there in the world to decide what you want to do or where you want to work with, or careers and different fields that you want to explore. Choose wisely those decisions. Maybe go with a business that might not be as on the top 200 list of businesses, but go with one that is one of the best known for sustainability, or go with a business that is actually developing renewable energy systems, or go with businesses that align with your beliefs. Not just at that intern and co-op level, but also potentially even with your career choices as well. And then as instructors that are out there as well, I think they're kind of almost the exact same suggestions, but is a lot of theory out there, and work on sustainability. Shared value is one that I use really often, and was the Julius of the start of all this work that I do, and corporate social responsibility and things like that. Even if you don't teach those subjects, there is probably ways that you can bring those things or those concepts in to your classroom. So for example, when you're in a marketing subject or something like that, you can try and work out a way to bring it in there, so it's laced throughout the entire degree and all the work that students doing, and not just only if they happen to take a CSR subject or a sustainability subject. And then the second thing that I find is even more meaningful is creating business projects that build sustainability in. I'm an experiential educator. I'm very passionate about the power of experiential education. And so in all the curriculum that I design and create, I try and make it active. And even now, where we're all in this remote paradigm, it's so much more exciting to be working collaboratively on a project, I think, in an online setting with a group of students. Yes, it's very challenging. Collaboration is very challenging, but it's something we all need to learn how to do. So I think it's more interesting and engaging to be working on a real project and seeing how the theory that you're learning comes to life in the real world, as opposed to doing what I'm doing right now, apologetically, which is more of a lecture style. So I think you can kind of bring practical things into the curriculum that actually bring it to life, and show students actually how it is. So one of the things that I do at Northeastern University is I'm part of a research team, and our role is to we developed what's called a virtual internship intervention. So Northeastern, for everybody that doesn't know, is very well known for co-op, which is an educational model where students study for half the year, but then they go and work in a business for the other half of the year. So over the course of a 5-year degree, they actually do 2 or 3 6-month full-time employment stints as part of their study, and it's all integrated into their study. But one of the issues with that type of model is that it's not accessible to non-traditional students or degree completer students or working adults or online students that just or may not have the capacity to be able to like leave a full-time job that they're trying to juggle on side of studying to be able to go and do a 6-month placement in a business where they have no guarantee of getting a job at the end. And so what we look for as our research team is there an alternative model to give students the same opportunity to be able to explore careers and get experience, like practical hands-on experience, to apply the theory and the concepts they're learning in the classroom in the real world. And so we came up with this concept of a virtual internship. And it's basically a capstone project, if everybody's familiar with those. I feel like in business schools, we're fairly familiar with those. It's essentially a capstone project, but it's built into every course that the students take. So instead of doing a final exam, the students do a project that basically brings to life the skills and theories that they've been learning in the classroom into the real world. And so using technology, the technology supports the ability to be able to have an industry partner give a real world project and a team of students to be able to work on a project for that industry partner. And then the cool thing is when you've created that model, it doesn't matter what the projects are. So one of the things that I've loved is creating projects that students can do for businesses that are actually aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So I have a few examples of those here on the screen, the ones that we've come up with. So the aligned to SDG 12 value chain analysis. So having the students that are working in, a manufacturing course or operations management class or something like that, choosing a business, analyzing a value chain of a product from the raw materials to the end user, and recommending changes that are cost effective yet make the value chain more sustainable over the long term. Other things that we've done is, aligned with human resource management, evaluate a company's diversity as representation of the communities they work in and the people and products they serve. So that linking that to diversity, equity, inclusion, which is a big topic here in the United States right now. But, being able to lace this sustainable development goals in there, and future talent development as well, recommending a community education initiative that will develop a long-term talent pipeline for the business. Maybe the business has some work that gets done in a low resource or a developing country. Maybe there's a way that they can be involved in the local community in a way that is actually going to benefit the business over the long term as well. So there's so many different ways that you can build projects that students can do to practice the skills that they're developing in their content area that also have a context of sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that what that really does is makes it way more tangible for the students, and for the students to be able to see how they would actually bring this amazing concept and this amazing, I guess, reporting mechanism we have to track our success on how we're going in terms of sustainability all around the world into their work and their everyday practice, and having it in mind in all the work that they do. So giving them a chance to practice that. So a couple of examples that are out there in the real world, these are programs that I've been involved in designing. And I wanted to give you some examples of these. If we were going to be live in session, I was going to try and do a simulation of one of these, but I'm going to share them with you. I also have a digital version. So if anybody is interested in having a look and clicking through the digital versions of these, I can share them with you. You can just reach out to me via email or whatever, and I'm happy to share them with you. But one of the ones that I was involved in recently is API, or Academic Programs International, created a social innovation lab. So they have a program that they run where the students are learning innovation skills. So they're stepping through the innovation process. But what they decided to do was that the students work in teams. They have to pick a sustainable development goal, and they have to pick a business that they're interested in, I guess, innovating, or a domain or area that they want to innovate around. And they have to go through the Lean Launchpad process, which is an innovation process for those who are not familiar with it, to develop an innovative solution to solve a problem that would have an impact on the metrics of that sustainable development goal. So API, each cohort, they decided to focus on a different SDG. So they bring in experts from those fields to kind of support and mentor the students as they go through this process of learning innovation through developing social innovations aligned with achieving the SDGs. And so it's a really cool program. They work in a team. The students are based all over the world, so they get to collaborate. They learn all these really brilliant skills of virtual collaboration that we all need now because we're all working remotely, but all in the process of doing this thing. And then the other one that I was involved in as a shared value micro project. So the Social Innovation Lab is a little bit removed from actually working one-to-one with a business mentor or something like that. But the way the shared value micro project is very different is the students actually are doing this work for a business. So businesses sign up to be involved in this program, and what they have to provide the students with an industry partner, like a mentor, a physical person that from the business that is going to work with the students on this program. The students have to work in teams to recommend a business solution that aligns with the principles of shared value. So essentially, they have to look at a business, they have to analyze the business and work out a way that that business can be more sustainable, can have a more weighted, I guess, value proposition, and not just be all about profit. But they have to make that recommendation to the business, and the cool thing is a lot of small businesses and medium businesses, particularly in Australia where this program primarily is, those businesses don't really have the time to do this for themselves. And usually there's some really, really, really quick wins that they can have that have them, might even save them money over the long term, but are really sustainable processes. Just simply like changing their printing philosophy and the way whether they print materials or not, changing from, physically signing documents to using DocuSign or whatever. So they're really simple things that the students are often recommending that would have a massive impact on the business. It does save them money, but they're also sustainable practices. And it's just for the lack of time that these small business and medium business owners have, that they haven't really thought about or had the time to implement these things themselves. So then they're also educating the business on how to be more sustainable. The students are learning about sustainability and shared value. And I guess there's actually some tangible outcomes where there's actually a sustainable solution that's implemented into a business. So it's super exciting. And I'm going to stop there and just, there's been a couple of comments. So I'm going to check the questions because I can't see that while I'm presenting. And then I'll give you a little bit of a step-by-step guide that I follow. But if anybody has any questions that you actually want to unmute yourself and ask, feel free to do that as well, just while I'm checking the chat.
Yeah, just a quick question on the last side, Nikki. This is terrific and very valuable, I think. So you were saying Practera. You had API for the Social Innovation Lab. What's Practera and how is it involved in that kind of a project?
Yeah, Practera is actually the experiential learning technology that I spent 6 years being a part of building. And so it's actually a technology company that also creates these types of programs. So they're programs that you can kind of utilize just the technology, or you can use the technology to build your own program. But the technology enables you to have the students collaborate around a business project, and then you as the educator get a dashboard that monitors the students' progress, and the industry partner is also engaged in the projects in the technology ecosystem, so they're giving real-time feedback to the students as they work through the project. So that they have a lot of actual, the shared value program is something I built while I was in Australia working with them before I relocated out here. And it's actually a full curriculum that's built on top of the technology that I built as a designer. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. You're very welcome. And then I have one question here that I'm going to, I feel like everybody can see it, but just in case you can't, I will read it out. So having worked for 2 oil and gas companies, one of the biggest challenges that sustainability group faces was convincing the leaders of the business value of adopting a sustainability approach. Convincing project leaders to change the design of a project, which would cost them a lot of money now, but save them a lot of money in the future. How would you suggest the issue be tackled early in the student curriculum? I honestly, I think this way is brilliant, kind of getting them to think differently, students to think differently right from the beginning. And apologies talking about you to any of the students that are in the room, but having these conversations early, having it really early on in their thinking. I would also say, like, one of the things from, I guess, an education perspective is showing one of the hard things about things from a human learning perspective about something that is a long-term win is not being able to see the fruit of the outcome, or not, because it's not an immediate win or an immediate impact. There isn't necessarily a connectivity to it. So one of the ways that I've addressed that in the past is tried to create a simulated version of the long-term win in a really short period of time. So being able to play out the impact in a data visualization or an immersive story or something like that. So one of the things that I do as a designer, I often, as an instructional designer, I don't work with people that build learning content and that's their profession. I go and work with people that work in the entertainment industry, because they know how to tell a brilliant story that we all want to watch and isn't considered work. We do it for entertainment. And so what I would say is try and work with people that are really great at storytelling and really great at having someone experience, in a movie, in the space of an hour, we can learn so much about, something that will happen in a person's lifetime, because we see it play out right before our eyes. I remember going and seeing the movie Mandela and being so impacted by that movie. I was probably also impacted by the lifetime of Mandela's work, but the fact that I saw it in such a small period of time, I think it would have impacted a lot of people, because they could see the impact of his lifetime of sacrifice and the choices that he made along the way and all of that. So I think if you can work out a way to show the win in a sense, in a truncated amount of time, that can often help as well make the more long-term decision, because people can see a connection to the positive outcome in a much more shorter period of time. So hopefully that answers that question. Great. So was there anybody else that had a question just before I move on to this how-to? Great. I'll take the silence is good. So the first step that I use when I'm designing a learning program, and I'm happy to share these slides with everybody, so please don't frantically try and write if you're trying to write all this down. Step one, what are your learning outcomes? And so this is an example of the learning outcomes of that innovation program that I was telling you about, right? So it doesn't, when you're writing any of your classes, or when you're planning a course, you're probably going to have learning outcomes, so these are learning outcomes for the course that I'm using as an example for the explanation. So create innovative solutions to business challenges. Design a desirable, feasible, and viable business model for implementation of an innovation. Integrate business skills, knowledge, and experience of a diverse team to solve complex business challenges. So what I'm trying to articulate here is these are fairly business school orientated learning outcomes. These are all things that our students in business schools need to know how to do. But there's no reason why they can't do that within a sustainable development goal context, if you build it into the story or the narrative of the program that you're doing. And so they're still going to learn the skills, they're still going to learn innovation, they're still going to learn to collaborate, but why not have them learn this amazing concept of giving back, or measuring their impact over the longer term into their practice? So a few ideas for you. Innovation has to make a contribution to the SDG 4 metric in a low resource economy, right? If you put that parameter on these learning outcomes, it doesn't change the learning outcomes, but it means that the focus and the students are going to have to research and make recommendations aligned to educational development. The second one, the innovation that they create has to have a lower the carbon footprint of the product 10% over the next 5 years, right? So they're still learning those same learning outcomes, they're still collaborating as a team, but we've put them in the framework where they have to work on a sustainable solution. So the idea that they're coming up with isn't something crazy and resource intensive, but something that's actually going to improve our system over the longer term, and innovation has to be viable. So they also, in line with that, have to make sure that it's something that a business would want to do. And then the other idea, innovation has to take an existing product or a competitive advantage and apply it to address one of the SDGs. So they basically have to evaluate the company and make a recommendation to a company or a business or whatever on how they could utilize something that they already have to make an impact, and address one of the SDGs and help contribute to the metrics that we're going for in one of those SDGs. So they're really cool context that you can add to this innovation program that doesn't change the learning outcomes. It doesn't change the syllabi. It doesn't change you having to go and get approvals in the institution and all that, but you can bring this concept into the classroom and bring it to life in the students' learning. And then the third thing that I would say, so you might have all these brilliant ideas. Hopefully everyone's coming up with some brilliant ideas of how they can now bring this into their classroom. But I'll caveat that with the third step is consider your students. So Design 101 is that it's probably about 15 to 20% about the content, and 80% about the students, right? So you have to, it's not just about going, what do I want my students to learn, but how are the students that I have going to most effectively learn that? And this is a model that I love to use for this, Dreyfus model of skill acquisition. It was created by Dreyfus and Dreyfus, two brothers. One of them was in computer science, and the other one was in education. So it's a very qualitative, I really love it. It aligns with the way my brain works. But when you think about it, any new piece of knowledge, anything that we're trying to teach a student, that it's not they don't know and then all of a sudden they know. They have there's a process, so they're a novice when it comes to doing the thing that we want them to do with that knowledge. Maybe they're an advanced beginner, maybe they're competent, they already know how to do it, and what we're trying to get them to do is practice, which is what internships and co-ops are often all about. They might be proficient, they might be an expert. One of the things that I find really interesting is when students are kind of novices, but they think they're an expert. I don't know if anyone else has had that student in their classroom, but I certainly have. And that makes it a little bit more challenging. But this basically, the way that I use this model is I always try and think, okay, where are my students at legitimately with the content that I need to teach them? So where are they? Have they already learned the innovation process? Have they already had a chance practicing the innovation process? Do they have no idea about innovation whatsoever? Where are they at? And the great thing is once you have answered that question of your students, the model provides some really great tips to help with the way that you design your program. And so, for example, this is just a really basic example here. If someone is a novice and they have no experience whatsoever, you can't really just throw them in and go, hey, create an innovation and just throw them out there. They need rules, they need a process, they need some guidelines to follow, they probably need a little bit of direction. Whereas if you try and give too much rules and regulation and direction to someone that's competent or proficient, they're just going to be frustrated with all the rules and regulations you've given them. And that frustration actually decreases their ability to learn the information that you really want them to get. The second thing that it gives you an idea about is like the content. So a novice doesn't know what should be considered and what shouldn't be considered. So they don't have that ability to automatically filter. So the example that I use when I explain this is it's like when you first started driving a car. So for those of you who drive a car or ride a bike, when you first learn to drive a car, and you're a novice, you have to think about everything at every point. You check all your mirrors, you indicate at every turn, you don't focus on anything else. You don't listen to music. You don't answer questions of anyone talking to you. You're just completely focused on everything and what's important so that you don't crash, which rightfully so is a good thing. But as you get to be a more experienced driver, you can do many other multiple things. You know that, if you're making a right-hand turn, you don't really need to look into your left-hand mirror. So you've decided what you need to focus on in order to successfully make the turn, instead of considering every option because you really don't know. And so this is the same with us with knowledge. As we learn, initially we don't know what's important and what's not. So we sometimes get overloaded with the information. So in that paradigm, maybe it's the business project, you need to give them a curated list of resources that they have to review, instead of saying, go out into the internet and find your own. Whereas if you give a more experienced person a curated list, they might feel restricted by that. And then the final one is that metacognitive ability one here. So a novice doesn't know what they don't know. And whereas somebody that's an expert, they really know what information that they know. They kind of aware that they don't know everything. They probably have tips and tricks to find out the information that they don't know. So the way that you would teach that type of learner would be very, very different. And so again, a curated list of resources for a novice, or multiple rounds of feedback, so that you can help unearth those things that a learner doesn't know. So that structure is really important. And so hopefully that helps. I'm not going to go into this one. This is just a more detailed version of that last slide, but I've popped it in the slide deck in case it's useful for people. And then making it practical, I always like to make it practical, and then I'm going to leave the rest of the time for questions. These are some things, I guess, if you have students that are kind of first year and they're really just learning, you really need to consider the complexity of the content. So you can kind of put blinders on or put bumpers. I like to think of it at bumper bowling. you're putting bumpers on it to help them have a greater chance of success. You know, whether you're asking them to analyze an entire company or just one product, or a company in one region as opposed to the whole global company, the degree of flexibility, is it their own idea or is it picking from a list? Sometimes you can overwhelm them with their own idea and they spend more time trying to come up with the idea than they do actually working on the thing that you want them to learn. So picking from a list is often better if they're younger or less experienced learners. And then SDG choice. You know, is it the instructor's choice or is it the student's choice? There's pros and cons for both of those. You know, sometimes maybe it's easier for you if you have only just one that they're working on. Student choice, I guess, gives them some agency in the decision. But again, if you're giving them a choice too early on, you might find that they get decision paralysis and aren't able to make the decision. And so these are all the types of things that you can consider based on that model that will help you kind of not only design a really cool program, but design one that's actually hopefully going to work for your students to learn how to bring the SDGs into their study. So I'm going to leave it there and I'm happy to answer questions or go into more detail on any of the things that we just talked about. So over to you. And if there's none, hopefully I don't think anything has come through on the chat. Awesome. Well, I mean, as I said, I'm here for another 5 minutes, I believe. Feel free. I've had a few people sending me private messages about asking for the slides and things like that. Feel free to let me know if you want it. If there's anything else that I can help with, please let me know. And my email, I'll actually just pop it back to the front. So if anybody wants my email, it's on the slides on the front slide. Feel free to reach out to me at my email address right there or on LinkedIn or anything else. And I'm so excited. It's been such a great time being here so far this week at this conference. And I'm looking forward to collaborating with you all as the conference goes on.
Nikki, actually, someone just put a question in the chat.
Oh.
Doug asked, have you noticed that teams work together better on these kind of topics than standard teamwork, or any particular challenges for teams?
I would say if I was this is something I subconsciously did initially and then realized that I was doing it. I found that if you team the students based on what goal that they want to do, which SDG that they're interested in, you're basically taking a stab at aligning their passion. And usually a lot of conflict in a team is because they're out of alignment with the vision or the direction or the way they're going to go about it. And so if you have them aligned based on the thing that they're passionate about or the thing that at least they're interested in pursuing, it kind of eliminates one of those fundamental conflicts. And I find that often helps. I think teams, particularly collaborating, is just really hard. One of the other strategies that I found works really well with teams is if you give them a language to talk about their differences. So in the Practera, for example, we have an automated peer review process. So the students actually give each other regular feedback on their teamwork skills and how they're going with their teamwork skills. And because we're providing that outlet for the students to give feedback, what we've seen is that the collaboration tends to become more effective as the students go through the program, as opposed to them having more conflict as they go through. So they tend to have conflict up front because they get their first peer review and they're not happy with the result, but then actually crafting the ability for the students to have a conversation about those differences and those perspectives, it actually gets them working better together more quickly. So they're the two things that I've used that actually really help. And thank you, Taha, for popping my email address in the chat. That answered a lot of questions. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Oh, is there another question?
No, I was just going to thank you. This is Gina here again, and I thought it was a wonderful presentation. I want to remind everybody to fill out the stars on the feedback on the SDG app. If you just click the star for this session, then 1 to 5 stars come up, and you could put 5 stars in about 1 second. So please be sure to do that. Nikki, this was fabulous. I got so many ideas for my classes.
Thanks. That's
I'm
what
gonna
I
try a
hope.
lot of them out. Thank you.
Great. I'm just quickly PDFing the slides so I can pop them in the chat as well before I head off for
Thank you.
some water.
Okay, great job, and congratulations on your PhD.
Thank you so much.